My Lord, can I just take this opportunity of tendering an apology to colleagues in the gathering here who may or may not have been trying to get me by email because unfortunately my laptop decided not to work while on the train this morning and has only recently recanted from that position. So if people sent me emails this morning, I didn't get them. I have been given one in hard copy since.
The theme of the day seems to be technical glitches. Let's hope that it's restricted to today, but some things are outside our control. Mr. Lambert. Good afternoon. Now, Mr. Connell.
Thank you. Mr. Lambert, just before lunch, we were looking at the final ventilation-related document that IDS prepared, and I was just wanting to finish going through that very briefly so we understand it. We talked about air tightness of fabric and issues over penetrations that had to be dealt with. In the next paragraph, so that's 2/3 of the way down the page, a paragraph starting, in addition to the foregoing, you're talking about reviewing supply air volume flow rates within peripheral areas. What's the objective of doing that?
I was looking at looking at the viability of reducing supply air into certain less critical areas to try and promote or put in more supply air into the BMT and the daycare unit. Primarily the BMT, I think. No, both areas. With a view to redirecting the supply air provisions into the BMT and the day-stay ward spaces.
So at that stage, it's a question of looking at this to see what's possible rather than knowing what's possible. Is that right?
You'd need to agree as well if you were going to reduce air change rates in other areas of the ward. That need to be discussed and agreed as well.
Thank you. And then the penultimate paragraph talks about impact on downtime and so on. And then the final one is just an instruction essentially as to what the lead consultant is going to have to do. Is that right?
Yep.
Thank you. Well, I'm finished with that. I'm going to ask you one or two questions which perhaps in some ways hark back to what we've discussed today in slightly random order. So please accept my apologies for that. You may not know the answer to this. If so, please just say so. You remember that you found a reference in one of the commissioning reports to an air handling unit which was full of water. And you thought it was appropriate that you should, as it were, repeat that note in your report. Do you have any information as to what was done about that air handling unit being full of water?
No.
Do you remember discussing it with Mr. Powery or anyone else?
No.
Thank you very much. When we were discussing thermal wheels, we were discussing them obviously in the context of your examination of wards 2A and 2B. In your report, you included a note which the general effect of which was to say, I believe there are thermal wheels elsewhere in the hospital, in various other locations.
Yes.
You remember that?
Yep.
Now, did I understand you correctly to say that somewhere you had seen an Excel spreadsheet showing where all the thermal wheels were?
Yes.
First of all, had you seen such a sheet?
Yes.
Where did you see it?
On Zootech.
Sorry?
On Zootech.
On Zootech?
Yep.
So, and it showed, whether there was a thermal wheel in ward such and such.
It was an Excel sheet.
Right.
And it listed the facilities.
Right. So you think that was in Zootech somewhere?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Can I ask you this, that the evidence you've given us this morning about the impact of build-up of dust and dirt on the components of an air handling system indicated that it had an impact on performance because the air doesn't flow as easily. When you were examining, did you examine air handling units in 2A and 2B to see how clean or dirty they were?
No,
That wasn't something you were asked to do?
no, that's non-intrusive inspection.
Non-intrusive inspection. Thank you.
So that's what you did,
Yes,
and therefore to have looked inside a unit would have been intrusive.
yes, it's just it's visual non-intrusive we do. Yeah.
Am I right in thinking, in relation to that answer, that to see the extent to which some parts of the system were, and I'll just use the word dirty without meaning anything special by it, you might have to switch the unit off and dig around inside the machinery?
Yes. You also got ductwork access hatches, so you could open up the ductwork and clean it with brushes and things like that. So you'd need to physically go into the ceiling voids and then into the ductwork.
And into the ductwork?
Yeah.
But these were not things you were asked to do for the purpose of your report?
No.
Thank you. Another sort of extra question, if I can, and I apologise for taking you back to the start of this story. You explained to us earlier that you think you were in the hospital for some other reason when you were asked to go and join a meeting that you recollected to be with Mary Ann Kane and Mr. Gallagher. Is that right?
Yes.
We have dates for your reports. Is it possible to work out a date for that meeting?
I honestly can't remember. Weeks. Within weeks, I would have thought.
The first report was delivered in, am I right in thinking, in October? Yes, so both of the 2A and 2B reports were delivered on dates in October. The 2A on the 24th and 2B, I think, on the 17th, something like that. 15th, my fault. Is it possible for you to work back from that when you think you had that very first meeting?
I would say late September.
Late September.
I thought so.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you for dealing with these additional matters. I just want to ask you essentially a couple of questions, probably, about a quite different report that your firm was involved with. And am I understanding correctly that your company was asked to do a report on the CHP, the Combined Heat and Power Plant operation?
It was on the energy centre.
On the energy centre?
Yeah, that supplies heat to the actual adult and children's hospital.
I'll just ask you this generally. Can you remember who asked you to do that?
Alan Gallagher.
Alan Gallagher. Thank you. Now, that report appears in bundle 6 at page, here we are. Sorry, not bundle 6. Bear with me. Bundle 15. Thank you. It's document 34 and it starts at page 674 electronically. It's a very large report and you'll be pleased to know I'm not going to ask you all about it because as things stand, I, for present purposes, don't need to ask you about sorry, it's 1072, yes, you're quite correct. I've been corrected as to the correct page of that report, it's 1072. Whether the CHP plant was operating correctly as a CHP plant is not something I need to ask you about today. But one of the issues that you were looking at in the course of doing the work on the energy centre was water temperatures. And am I right in thinking that you're aware of the use of water temperatures within the new hospital as part of a mechanism for controlling Legionella and other infections?
Yes.
And in layman's terms, that's because water between a particular lower temperature and a particular higher temperature is regarded as a good breeding ground for bacteria and the like.
Yep.
Is that something you're familiar with?
Yes.
Now, can you just tell me generally, did anything that you found in the course of your study of the Energy Centre in May 2018 have an impact on the use of the water system for maintaining a disinfectant regime?
I found the temperatures weren't in compliance with SHDM requirements.
So you're allowing your voice to drop a bit.
The temperatures weren't in compliance with the SHDMs.
Right. Thank you.
Low temperature or return temperature. We also found that the system was struggling to maintain the desired set temperature through the control system. So
Right.
from memory, it was set to maintain 65 degrees in the storage cylinders, whereas the system wasn't maintaining that temperature. It was lower.
Right.
So the system was set to 55.
So the system was set to maintain hot water at 65 degrees.
65.
And it was maintaining below that, below 60. And from memory, the return temperature was above 5 degrees, whereas it's meant to be maintained within 5 degrees.
And I'll take you to a part of the report just in a moment, but just taking that generally, did this have an impact on what you understood to be the intended use of the water system for prevention of Legionella and the like?
But the temperatures were still above what you'd need to maintain them at. There was still a reasonably hot temperature, essentially.
Right.
But they're out with what they should be stored at and what they should be circulating at.
Sorry, just give me that again. They were out with?
They were above. They were within a range of temperatures that would have stopped bacteria growth.
Right, but
They were
not
above
what they were meant to be.
But no, significantly lower than what they should have been.
And are you taking 55 degrees as the
Return.
necessary temperature to inhibit microorganisms growing? You've explained that the system was set for 65.
Yep.
You found lower temperatures.
Yep.
Can I take it from that the temperatures that you found were above 55 or
Below? They were below 55, but they were above
55.
50. They were above 50.
But they were above 50. Thank you.
And did you report on that issue in this report?
Yes.
Yes. I wonder if we could just scroll past page 1072 to the next page, please, and we'll go past the index. Right. Yeah. Can we look on to the next page, 1075? I'm looking here at the top of page 2 of the report, page 1075 of the electronic bundle. Are you reporting at the very top of that page about some change that had been made to the control system? We're talking about modifications.
Yes.
And what had been done?
The system was originally intended to have a 105 degrees C flow temperature and a 75 degrees C return temperature. But the operation of the system and the intended control of the system wasn't functioning correctly at installation and handover stage. So post handover, the control engineers, along with the consultants or the contractor, modified the system so it wasn't operating at 105. I found it at some point operating at round about 60 degrees C flow temperature,
Instead of
105.
quite a big difference.
Yes. And it serves air handling equipment and plate heat exchangers that serve hot water cylinders. So if that plate heat exchanger is expecting to see a 105 flow temperature and you give it 60 or 70, it's not going to be able to heat the water as quickly as it was designed to. And thereby, the more usage you've got in your plumbing side of things can have a knock-on effect. It won't be able to recover itself as quickly.
Right.
And that's
So
when
if
your
people are
temperature's
running a
dropped.
lot of hot water somewhere and it's drawing from the system, it's not starting from the correct point, so it's struggling to get water of the correct temperature.
It can't recuperate itself as quickly as it's designed to, and thereby your temperatures drop.
Yeah. Because somebody's taken away all the hot water and the water that's left isn't as hot as it should be.
You can't heat it up as quickly as you should, or it's designed to.
So at the top of that page, you see a reference to this adversely influencing thermal comfort and increasing the risks associated with Legionella. What point were you making about Legionella there?
That point that if your temperatures and usage drop for a prolonged period of time, the system's not heating the water up as quickly as it should, thereby it could stay at a lower temperature for longer.
And if it's a lower temperature for longer, it may not meet the desired Legionella temperatures.
Yes,
Is that right?
within your circulation system and in your cylinders.
Now, I think in fairness to you, can I ask you to look at a further section of this report? It's at page 1119 of the electronic bundle. Do we find on that page a fuller explanation of the point you've been trying to make to us about the water not being at the right temperature, not being able to heat up fast enough, and then it's dependent on how much usage there is? Have I managed to focus on the correct part of this report? I see near the foot of that page, Mr. Lambert, it says in particular the domestic hot water services appear to have been rigidly designed on the basis of direct heating using plate heat exchangers so as to afford rapid recovery of domestic hot water temperatures and minimize risks associated with Legionella. Is that the point you've been making earlier?
Yes.
But I took you to a summary from the start of the report, but this is in the detailed material. Is that right?
Yes.
And just for completeness, can we look at 1125? And do we see on the second paragraph on that page that the descriptions you've set out early in the report identify the current operation resulting in temperatures that aren't in accordance with HSE guidelines because of Legionella?
You must be maintaining it below 60. HSE require you to store hot water above 60 degrees C.
Yeah. So you drew that to the attention of the board in the report along with all the other material that was Is it possible for you to judge how long this, let me call it a potential issue with temperatures, had been operating for?
It was difficult because the contractor and the BMS specialist were making modifications to the system post handover, and I was given there was no definitive documentation to tell me how it was intended. So we went to Zootech, and then we found a description of operation for the system, And when we looked at that relative to a site, it wasn't operating as that document. So when we drilled into that, we found the BMS specialist was writing up a new one that wasn't even available at that time. So they were still making changes to it.
Yeah. So it then therefore difficult for you doing a report to work out what had been done when.
Yes.
There wasn't a record of that in Zutec.
No.
Thank you. Now, I think we can leave that document. Thank you very much. I think before we have a short break to check for other matters, Willard, I just have one more matter to raise with Mr. Lambert. Very early on in your evidence, when we were talking about the parameters for particular wards and so on and so forth, and why an air change rate of 2.8 or 3 was to be found, you said that you'd now looked at some more documents which gave you an understanding of that. I just want to see if you have any comments on these. There are only two of them, and I can probably deal with one simply by narrating what it said, and then I'll put the other one to you. In a document which is bundle 16, page 1662, which is a thing called an M&E clarification log. What happens is that the board, this contains a series of exchanges, and nothing particularly arises from these other than what I'll tell you. The board says you're showing an air change rate of 2.5 an hour. It should be 6 in accordance with SHTM, and that's something you've already referred us to. And then the response to that is as follows. It says, Brookfield, that was the contractor's name at the time, proposal as outlined within the bid submission is to incorporate chilled beams as a low energy solution to control the environment which do not rely on large volumes of treated air or variable natural ventilation. All accommodation is single bedrooms, and therefore the need for dilution of airborne microbiological contamination should be reduced. Rooms could also be at slightly negative pressure.
Sorry, Mr. Connell, it's my fault. I'm just not finding.
Sorry, Lord. The part I'm reading from is on page 1664.
1664.
For in the second column on that page at the foot.
I now have that. Yes, I now have that.
If we ignore the reference to microbiological contamination, we can actually find over the page on 1665 a statement that 6 air changes is energy intensive and not necessary, and then there's a response to that. What I'd like to ask you about to see if you can assist the inquiry at all is another document that relates to that series of exchanges in a way that I needn't debate at the moment, which is the, where is it? It's bundle 17, page 2859. Now, Mr. Lambert, you weren't involved, as you confirmed right at the outset, in the design or contract exchanges for this hospital, but you were brought in later to produce a report on at least part of the ventilation system. And you've now been shown a document which seeks to, I think, argue for a reduction in air change rates to a different figure from the one you might expect from SHTM 0301. Have you had a chance to look at that?
This document?
Yes.
Yeah.
And do you have any comments whether in your view that provides good, bad or indifferent justification for moving to an air change rate of 3?
No.
So is that, you don't have any comment, or you don't think it provides justification?
I don't think it provides justification. It's saying here that if you put in 6 air changes, that's became excessive and likely to cause drafts to occupants, poor temperature control and increased energy consumption. But you could put in 10 air changes in that room and not make it drafty. You just need more supply air terminals and better distribution of the air supply. You could put 20 air changes in the room. It would use more energy because you're putting more air in.
Yeah. So your conclusion is that it would use more energy, which is one of the points that's being made, but there's no reason why 6 air changes couldn't be done.
No.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lambert. Now, my lord, I have no further questions, and my lord will probably have spotted that I've picked up 1 or 2 other questions that have been suggested to me. I'm content if my lord wishes to take a short break after this matter is concluded.
We'll do that, Mr. Connolly. Just give me a moment to look at this ward ventilation design strategy. You've had a chance to look at this, Mr. Lambert.
Yeah.
So the document seems to begin by looking at the temperature required by GGC. It then says the SHTM, and I think we're speaking about SHTM 0301 here.
Yep.
Allows for natural ventilation of areas including general wards. I suppose if you're thinking about natural ventilation, you've got to suppose that windows will be opened. Therefore, yes, if it's an area without an opening, a window that can be opened, that doesn't really apply. And under mechanical ventilation, it says the recommended air change rate for single rooms is 6 air changes per hour. Well, that perhaps depends on the use that the rooms are being put. Because you've given us the example of neutropenic wards where the recommendation is 10.
Yes, this is referring to a single room by the looks of things.
Sorry, I missed that.
This looks like it's referring to a single room application, a typical single room.
Yeah, doesn't apply to neutropenic wards.
And they seem to be relating air change rate to temperature, which again is not correct.
And it concludes, while the air change rate is less than the SHTM, now that's less even than the general single rooms. It's in compliance with Scottish building regulations.
But I think that's, you need 8 litres per second per person for Scottish building regulations. SIBSE will probably recommend 10 litres per second per person, whereas that's for fresh air to breathe. For occupancy ventilation, it's not for a healthcare.
But of course, the purpose of the SHTM is to make recommendations in relation to healthcare facilities.
Specifically, yeah.
Whereas the Scottish building regulations apply to any space.
Any occupied space, yeah.
Right. Thank you. Now, as Mr. Connell suggests, there may be further questions. So if you could give us perhaps 10 minutes, I'll invite Mr. Fox to take you back to the witness room.
Thanks.
No, you understand that there are further questions.
There are a small number of further questions for this witness, my lord. I don't think they'll take very long.
Very well.
Mr. Lambert, thank you for bearing with us and for returning. I just have a small number of questions for you. And one is in a sense a follow-on from something you explained to us earlier about having a single air handling unit for a ward with lots of ill patients in it. At that point, you were explaining to us that one of the consequences was that if the air handling unit failed, or part of it, then there was no ventilation because there was no natural ventilation. And that would obviously cause practical difficulties. Can I ask you a sort of follow-up to that, which is, if you have a system like that where there is a single air handling unit providing the air to a particular ward, and there is no natural ventilation, how do you carry out maintenance?
That was noted in the report.
I mean, how do you maintain a system where to maintain it might involve, for instance, shutting it down? Does that mean taking everybody out? You've been asked just to explore what the realities are of that.
If you don't provide the fresh air for occupancy, it shouldn't be occupied in accordance with Scottish building regs, irrespective of SHTM guidance.
Yeah, so
you would lose your heating and cooling facility as well, because your heating and cooling is via your supply air system. So you wouldn't just have, you would have no fresh air and no control over the comfort of your environment.
So let's say I had wanted to go and do some maintenance work on the air handling unit for 2A, and it involved not just dusting the grills, but doing something a bit more intrusive. Would that mean switching off that air handling unit and moving everybody out?
Theoretically, yes. If you could get a heating coil could burst in your air handler, or a cooling coil, or changing filters over, or your fan could have a critical failure.
So any of these are failures that might require you to switch the unit off. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, there'd be a prolonged downtime whilst you undertake the remedial works. And in that time, there's no fresh air supply into the facility.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you very much, Mr. Lambert. The other two, I don't know whether you'll be able to help me as much with. I want to take you back to the start of your evidence for two reasons. One is, I'm looking back to that very first discussion that you're on site, you're called in to a room in the estates block part, presumably. I can understand that you come out of that room with a remit to go and look at wards 2A and 2B and see whether it's possible to increase air changes from 3 to 6. That bit we follow. But the question really is, were you able to understand from that conversation whether those talking to you already knew there was a problem?
I'm assuming they were aware that it was under 6. To be able to ask me, could you look at the viability of increasing it to 6? Although there must have been concern there.
Thank you. And the final question I have for you, and thank you for your patience, is just to ask you one that I pretty much asked you beforehand, but I want to put in a slightly different way. And that is, we were trying to date that initial meeting, and you thought it was probably late September, but you couldn't be more precise. Can you remember, or can you not, whether it was before Ward 2A was closed? Because at one point, Ward 2A was decanted into another part of the hospital.
I think the ward was still occupied.
Sorry, I didn't.
I think the ward was still occupied, or it was in the process of being decanted.
When you were first involved?
When I first entered the ward.
Right.
Yeah. Which is, I must have got the remit and then went straight to it. So it must have been within a day.
Right. So at the point when you had the first meeting, you think you may have gone straight to the ward to have a look? Was that what happened?
Or within a day or so.
Within a day or so?
Yeah.
Presumably accompanied by someone from
Estates.
From
I would've
Estates.
thought, yeah.
And you think the ward was still occupied at that time?
Yes, I think it had been decanted at the time.
It was being
Oh,
decanted
they're in the process of.
in the process.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I have no further questions, my lord.
Right, can I just check with the room that Mr. Connell has asked what he's been asked to ask? And I think I take it that there are no further questions. Mr. Lambert, thank you very much for your attendance, but also thank you very much for the work that has gone into preparing your witness statement. I appreciate that that will have been extensive. I'm grateful for that, and it is very useful to the inquiry. But you're now free to go.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Now, as I understand it, Mr. Connell, you have no further witnesses today,
That's correct.
but you hope to begin at 10 o'clock tomorrow with Mr. Parry?
Yes.
Right.
And Mr. Powery, as everybody in the room knows, my lord, has a very extensive witness statement.
Mm-hmm.
I will not be taking him to all of it for purely practical reasons, but I will be endeavouring to uncover as many of the issues of significance as I can. He will not have the same problem as Mr. Lambert of wondering how much more time we have. The question will be trying to get Mr. Parry finished in the day, but we'll see.
Well, we'll see each other again at 10 o'clock. Until then, a good afternoon.